There's no place like the Cube.
Hey, I'm Darren.
And I'm Esther, and this is Second Sunday, a podcast about Black queer people finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith.
When I joined the church, the most horrible thing the church did in my life, to me, I think, was that it taught me to hate people that I loved.
Whew, we are getting into it today. Our guest today is Reverend Dr. Pamela Lightsey. She currently serves as Vice President for Academic Affairs at Meadville Lombard Theological School and as interim site pastor of Urban Village Church's Hyde Park Woodlawn campus in Chicago. She also happens to be Esther's pastor.
That's correct. You know how you have that pastor that's your pastor / mentor in your head for your whole life?
Uh-huh.
That's who Dr. Lightsey is in my head. She's just cemented as this is my pastor. Every time I say my pastor, I'm always talking about her, even though for a long stretch of time, we didn't even see each other, right? So that's how impactful she's been. We have known each other for over 20 years now.
Wow. Well, in this episode, we're going to do a couple things. For folks who are joining us, if you listened back to episode 1, you got to hear my story of coming out and learning to love myself through all of it, and even how I escaped a cult.
I just want to interrupt you for a second, Darren. If y'all have not gone back and listened to episode 1 with Darren's story, do yourself a favor, because it definitely took me on an emotional roller coaster. That roller coaster was mostly with the emotion of anger, but I suggest that you go back and listen to it.
It really is worth a listen. And I was so thankful to the team for how they captured it and how they retold it. But I want to turn the mic around today. I want to hear your story and how your story connects with Reverend Lightsey.
Yeah, my experience. Let me see. Where do I even begin? I'm the oldest of 4 kids. Being the oldest child in Nigerian culture is a really big deal. Mm-hmm. And I'm the oldest girl. So I'm really expected growing up to be an example for my siblings, an example for everyone, a representation of my family in so many ways. I was born in Nigeria. I speak 2 different languages. I was very much expected to be perfect in certain ways, perfectly behaved, perfectly, all of the things, all of the goody two-shoes, #granola things, the things that you do to turn your oldest daughter into kind of the third parent in a situation. And so I was very aware of the expectations that my family had of me. And you know me, I like to keep to myself in certain regards. It was around my junior year of high school, end of junior year. I went through this painful breakup. Oof, painful. And my parents could clearly tell that there was something wrong with me, but they couldn't figure out what. And I wasn't about to tell them. African parents don't even believe in mental health stuff. And they were like, something's wrong with her mental health. I was like, oh, it's that bad, huh?
Oh, you was down bad.
And so, down bad, Darren, down bad. And so they were like, you need to talk to your pastor. And at this point, my relationship with Dr. Lightsey had gone through confirmation. She'd made it clear that it was a safe space to ask questions and things like that. And so when I decided to talk to her about that, because at first, there was always a possibility of just fronting and being like, yeah, I'm depressed, my grades, not really. But after a while, I was just like, look, let me tell you something. I was like, it's something I gotta tell you, bro. And I know this is gonna come as a surprise. Hold on to your stole. Hold on to your Jordans, Dr. Lightsey. I have some shit you are not gonna believe, bro. But I beat around the bush a little bit, and then I was finally like, I like girls. And basically I probably said what can I do about this? And she was like, I remember exactly how she said oh honey, there's nothing wrong with you, like that. And I was like, what? Wait,
what went through your head?
What do you mean there's nothing wrong with me? I have been thinking about this for at least 8 years. What the fuck are you talking about? There's something wrong with me. I have been doing diagrams about this.
Not the Venn diagrams.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, my relationship with Dr. Lightsey is definitely a big part of my story when it comes to just my younger years and learning who I was and just dealing with all of the things that you deal with when you are a young, queer Christian person who only lives in a world in your head because you have no words to describe what you're going through on the outside.
I know a lot of us can really resonate with that. I know that you have this high regard for Dr. Lightsey.
I do.
And I'm also trying to give you just a little bit of a heads up that she is a whole person.
I know.
And respectfully, we are going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about sex.
Oh.
We're going to talk about weed.
Oh, Lord.
And it just is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's all love. It's no judgment. But the Saints ain't ready for this.
But we're going to do it anyway.
I grew up in South Florida in West Palm Beach in a large household. My mom, my dad, and I had 6 brothers and sisters. Large number of folks. And my neighborhood was a mixture of middle class, very impoverished African Americans, which also became a site for drug trafficking. In fact, my oldest sister got addicted to heroin and trafficked drugs.
Where she lived was also home to a very visible gay community who she got to know through her brother, who was a gay musician.
My brother would come over and we would go partying on the weekends. So we partied from West Palm Beach and we would make our way down south. We would go from West Palm Beach to Fort Lauderdale to Miami. And we would hit all the gay clubs, as many as we could in one night, you see. And my brother and I, we had practiced a routine. So we danced together on the floor. We tore up many a floors dancing, he and I. Oh, we danced and we put on a show. And we also loved to just play around with folks. Late at night, we would go on 7-Eleven and say the male cashier would say, "How are you all doing?" And my brother would walk in flaming, just like the doors open only for me kind of style. And my brother would say, "Oh, I'm fine as I look, honey. Fine as I look." My brother was fearless. And he would flirt with men up and down the street. And I'd be in the car just laughing myself. Oh, I would be laughing because my brother was so grand and so audacious and so out at a time where you would think it would be dangerous. But we lived in a community where gay men were out and proud. There's a word called reading somebody. That's a kind of play with words, but it's also very serious if you're angry. We had a trans woman, a Black trans woman by the name of Miss Felock, who was out and proud, you know. Miss Felock told one man he tried to talk against her. He was walking across the street and he tried to really be verbally abusive to her. And she stood up, snapped her fingers and said, "Look, I will drown your in the sea of don't with me today." That's the kind of reading that went on in my community, you see. It's that kind of joy.
At the age of 18, Dr. Lightsey left the comforts of home and joined the military. Meanwhile, back in her hometown, things were shifting. Drugs were making their way into the community, and her sister Sharon found herself trapped in the harsh world of heroin addiction. While serving in the military, Dr. Lightsey received an astonishing message. Sharon had a life-altering, mystical encounter with God, and as a result, had quit heroin cold turkey.
So my sister invites me to church because she's preaching at a revival at the church. And here I am sitting in church, small little church, and my sister's up in the pulpit, and the choir's singing. And I'm feeling like, okay, this is cool, because they're singing one of those, you all might not remember, one of those Walter Hawkins songs. And it's a beautiful choir. And I'm looking at my little sister, and I'm looking at another sister next to me, and I'm feeling some kind of way within myself. And I say, y'all all right? So I'm checking with them, when really that's kind of me, pushing it off on them, when really I should have been checking with myself. By the time of the altar call, my sister makes this altar call. And we're standing, and I'm looking around, and before I know it, it's like my feet take over, and I'm walking down the middle of the aisle. And before I can get and I look up, and I see my sister extending her hands to me and just crying with joy. And the next thing I know, I'm on the ground. And the women of the church are praying over me, and they got these white sheets, I got the whole Pentecostal come to Jesus experience. And I remember looking at them, and they looked so clean, so angelic. And my heart was filled with joy I'd never experienced before. And it was as though the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulder. And I remember them lifting me up from the ground, and my sister hugging me, and everybody so happy for me, and the choir singing another selection, I'm going up yonder. And I just shouted, and I'm tearing up right now thinking about it, because that song for me really described how I felt. And at the time I was about 18 years old. That experience has stayed with me to this point. It is the one experience that keeps me from walking away from the church. And yes, at the time, I considered myself heterosexual. I should say that also.
It's 2011 and the Arab Spring is raging. A lesbian activist in Syria starts a blog. She names it Gay Girl in Damascus.
Am I crazy? Maybe.
As her profile grows, so does the danger.
The object of the email was, please read this while sitting down.
It's like a genie came out of the bottle and you can't put it back.
Gay Girl Gone. Available now.
Hey friends, we're having a live event with PRX.
And we want you to join us virtually.
The PRX Big Questions Project presents
Making It, a night of big questions.
It's Tuesday, June 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Click the link in the show notes to register today.
Once she was saved, her relationship with her brother changed. Her conversion experience, which she calls miraculous and probably needs to be its own piece of bonus content, created distance between the two of them. Lightsey learned that in this new community, she would be required to choose between them and those she'd known and loved all her life.
The Pentecostal church was very clear about sin and the idea of me being close to a gay person without trying to win them to Christ was not accepted. I mean, and I tell people this, the church taught me in many ways to almost hate my brother. It taught me to despise what we would say was the lifestyle. Love the sinner, hate the sin. That's not possible. That saying really drew a wedge between me and my brother. And I used to try to witness to him. I saw my brother as being taken over as a good soul whose body was inhabited by demons. This is how I saw my brother because of the teachings of the church. And my responsibility because of the teachings of the church was to win my brother's soul to Jesus. So I had to preach hell out of him. I had to witness hell out of him. And that meant that my brother and I, while we had been very close, we became distant, not as close as we once were. So it was just horrible. When I got saved, not only were drugs ravaging our neighborhoods, but also AIDS. The onset of AIDS came in. My brother calls me early 90s, because it didn't take long. He calls me and tells me he has HIV. And I'm in Germany at the time. And I tell my brother, the first thing I say to my brother, this is the hatred of the church This is the hatred of the church. The first thing I say to my brothers, I told you need to give up that lifestyle. I told you that stuff would hurt you. I'm going after my brother rather than embrace my brother and show sympathy for a man that I loved. And that's a moment in my life that I can't erase. And I have to live with that forever, because my brother, not long after that, died from complications due to AIDS. His death was a horrible, horrible moment in my life. Just horrible.
Fortunately, she was able to see him before he passed away. And in that time, they made the peace that they could. At this point, she begins to question all the things she's been taught by the church.
So I began to question them in my early 20s. I'd married a soldier. I was a soldier at the time. I was a member of a Pentecostal church in Tacoma, Washington. And I was really studious with the Bible. And the more I read scripture, I think my very queer upbringing and my very sanctified church relationship or way of being began to clash with one another in the internal, the woman that I am internally. And some things just didn't make sense to me. And I began to question the pastor, who, by the way, was a woman. And the questions that I had about scripture were, why is it that you all say we can't do this? I don't see this in the Bible. And I began to ask questions, and I just asked too many questions for her. And eventually I got characterized as a disobedient Christian. I was disobedient, you see. And so with that disobedience, my pastor silenced me for a period of time. We moved from that place to a place in New Jersey. I asked questions of that church. Then we got to NATO-shaped headquarters, which is in Belgium, Mons, Belgium. And I asked questions of the tiny Pentecostal church there. I was directing a gospel choir, and they didn't want me to allow unsaved persons to participate in the choir, which made no sense in the world to me. The choir was not part of the church. The choir was a part of the military chapel system. I was going to church off base. And my pastor off base was trying to convince me that I need to stop working with that choir. And I told him no. I told him I wouldn't do it. I told him I didn't need to be a member of his church anymore. I told him that I could see the handiwork of God in the gospel choir, because people were coming and they were being blessed, and they loved to fellowship and they loved to share their gifts. And I thought that the love that I saw in that gospel choir, that volunteer gospel choir on base at NATO-shaped headquarters, was one of the most beautiful things that I'd seen. And I was willing to let go of the Pentecostal church at that point in time with all of its bigotry in order to be in a more dynamic Christian community. So I washed my hands of that denomination. And I just worshiped at the chapel. We toured, we had a gospel group, and I was becoming more and more open within the communities that we lived in. And I was looking at the handiwork of God outside the Christian church. And I was returning in my mind to the joy of my childhood.
Want to dive into how technology and Black spirituality intersect? Or confront the challenges new tech is creating? Maybe even catch a vision of hope for the future?
Check out Moral Repair, a Black exploration of tech. A podcast about the innovations that make our world and break our societies.
And how we can all heal just a bit. Available on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
when we got back to the States, we lived in Europe for 7 years. By the time we got back to the States, my marriage was falling apart, which I tell people was a thing that helped me to shift and return to think about who I was and what actually made me tick. And I began to think back in my childhood and my attraction, especially to this one woman when I was hanging out with my brother. This one lesbian woman who would convince my brother to bring me with him whenever they went to her house to smoke weed. And see, I was just a tag-along. I was a tag-along with my brother so they could get the weed. But I was also the key element, as far as this woman was concerned, to giving my brothers the weed, because she wanted to be able to look at me and flirt with me and try to get me to go to bed with her, which I wouldn't, you know. But I had to look back at that experience and how attracted I was to that woman and ask myself, why was that the case? And once I really got honest with myself, and it wasn't just an attraction, it was everything, all my hormones, everything was working when I was talking to this woman late at night on the phone, you know. I could wait for her phone call at night. I had to think about it. Okay, why was that? I was married 16 years, mind you, and had put that all in the back of my head. Going to school, studying sociology, being divorced, gave me the space to deal with who I was as a person. And at some point in my education and in my experience of myself, I recognized that at the very least, I was willing to be open to having another relationship with a woman. And honestly, it was a church woman who what's the word we call it, who really turned me out. A church lady turned me out, believe it or not. A couple of church ladies turned me out. Let me say that. Oh yeah, man. It was amazing. Getting to know who I was. I was buck wild for a moment. And not many sexual experiences that I did not have when I was trying to figure out who I was. And I was enjoying every one of them. Every one of those experiences. Yeah.
This is the content that I signed up for.
This is not the content that I signed up for at all. At all. I don't have to know everything. I learned that a long time ago. I don't have to know everything. It's certain things I just don't have to know.
Do you feel uncomfortable knowing that
I'm
your
not
pastor
uncomfortable.
had a whole buck wild
First of all, relax on the words that you're using, Darren. Don't start looking at vocabulary words to throw into this session. No, I don't have to know everything. Some things are beyond me. You understand? Like time, free will versus divine plan. Like time is a flat circle. There's certain things I don't have to be able to wrap my head around to go through life. And this is one of them. Pastor Lightsey is my pastor. The end. And you know what? I'm holding my hands out, facing upward like I'm ready to receive the benediction.
This show ain't over yet. Number one.
Man.
So, Esther, I am hearing you and I believe you. And I think one of the things that maybe sometimes never gets said in the conversation is that the more repressed a space is, the more essential people and their expressions become. But it's hard, right? So let's get back into this story, because eventually Dr. Lightsey decides that she wants to become a minister.
So there were several stages to becoming fully ordained. And I initially was not out. Well, I was trying to figure out who I was. There was no proclamation to be made until I figured out who I was. I came to Chicago in the closet. I pastored my first church on the south side of Chicago in the closet. At some point in time, once I left that church and went to work in the School of Theology, the United Methodist Church was having what they call their general conference, and I was listening to it online. This wonderful voice, Bishop Melvin Talbert. He comes, a cisgender black man, comes to the mic and pleads with the church not to continue its discrimination against the LGBTQ community. I'm in my office, I'm listening to this Black heterosexual man plead with the church to end its oppression of the LGBTQ community. I'm in the closet and I hear what he's doing and I start weeping in my office. I literally start weeping in my office. I'm thinking to myself, if he can be bold and courageous and he's not a member of this community, how dare I stay in the closet? So not long after that, I made an appointment with the president of the school, and I talked to him in the office, and I came out to him. He was very loving and generous, Phil Amerson, and said to me, Pamela, we know and we support you. And that gave me the courage to come out fully. So I spent quite a bit of time and put my credentials on the line, trying to help our Black clergy understand that civil rights is for everyone and should be within all places, including the church. That's not an easy journey. It has meant that I have been cast out of some areas in our church, but those are places that I don't want to be in anyway.
I almost teared up because that moment of being in a church space where you have learned how to keep yourself inside the lines, right? To appear straight, or to at least believe yourself to be straight in transition or in process. And then to have somebody outside to just affirm what your struggle is and then invite you or feel invited to be your whole self in that. Oh gosh, that just sends shivers through me on so many levels.
And this is part of the reason why I think it's so important to have allies.
They was like, we clocked you, sis. We see you.
We've been knowing. That is funny. I clocked that. There's something about someone standing up for you that does not have to, and who has to, you know what I mean? Everybody's not in a place where they can talk about that emotionally or whatever, you know? Right. And so hearing her experience with that is just it really resonates with me a lot because, yeah, I can relate to people going out of their way to be like, nah. And that's what church is supposed to feel like. And that's what community is supposed to feel like. But yeah, she definitely put a lot of her work on the line, as sad as that may sound, just to be like, this is who I am. So yeah, I can definitely understand how that broke her down to tears, hearing anybody say, you know, pick up the burden for a little bit and be like, I'm gonna carry this for this moment.
What I appreciate so much about your story and about Dr. Lightsey's story is the way God keeps showing up and reminding us that despite what the preachers have told us, despite what bad theology has taught us, despite what maybe some of our families have implied to us, that love really does win, that there's still something powerful and wonderful out there for each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
So Esther, what can you tell me about where you are in your journey with God?
Man, you know, I can say that I have never lost my relationship with God. That's always been a constant in my life and a constant saving grace in my life. One thing that I have learned after years of just kind of going through different things is that no human being can substitute for a relationship with God. Like it's that thing where they're like, you know, we're all born into this world alone and we're all going to die alone. And I think the same thing goes for your relationship with God. Like you have to take responsibility for your relationship and your spiritual journey and wherever it lands you, which means that no matter what, it's up to you to just kind of, like the song says, you know, Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. You have to pick up the phone yourself in your own way. And I've really been learning to just lean into that because it's a reflex to seek validation from other people. It's a reflex to think, okay, I can lean on someone to tell me what this says or what it means or what I should do and whatever. When the reality is God speaks directly to people. There is no validation that is needed from someone else for you to hear directly from God. And when I feel the most fulfilled in my life, spiritually, personally, where I feel the most grounded and at peace, which I am very grounded and at peace right now in my life, is when I have this direct one-to-one daily conversation. And it doesn't necessarily look the same every day, but it just feels like God is just with me all the time. And that is just what it is. And that really is all that I need at the end of the day. So yeah, I can definitely say that after all of these years, I don't really care what people think at all. Not even a little bit.
Not even a little teeny bit.
Not even a teeny bit. Too much has happened.
So where does the church fit in that?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I really do appreciate the atmosphere of church worship. And it was only recently, as in the last 2, maybe 3 years, that I started seeking a church space where I felt comfortable and was affirmed, just so I could kind of get in that atmosphere again, because there's not a lot of atmospheres that are like it. And funny enough, after that searching, I landed back at a church where Dr. Lightsey, after years of focusing on the academic world and not preaching, Dr. Lightsey is actually preaching at this church.
Did you know that she was there?
I didn't know, because when I first started going to Urban Village, she was not preaching there. And I went to Urban Village. I was like, this is interesting. This is nice. Okay, we'll see. And then all of a sudden on Facebook, she was like, I will be stepping in as an interim pastor. I was like, she's like, at Urban Village. I'm like, what? Oh, I'm definitely going here. And now she's in a more permanent role in that space. And I'm like, oh, well, this is clearly my church now.
God really does make a way out of no way. And it is so powerful for me to hear just those ways that you're on your journey and here you are, bloop blop, God puts you, or God leads you, or you find yourself with God in a church with Dr. Lightsey. This is wild, like all the ways that stuff works together for good, as the good book says.
My ministry is to work with the young and to work with the more mature and to carefully teach people how to become the beautiful human beings that God created them to be. But the other way that I do that is by speaking to love. I want the queer community to know, no, you're not an outcast. God loves you.
The Second Sunday podcast is hosted by Esther and Darren Calhoun. But podcasting is a team sport, so a big thank you to our dream team.
Our producers, Esther Anna DeShawn, and Nichole Hill. Our associate producer, Amber Walker.
Our sound designer, Florence Adams, and our managing producers, Jocelyn Gonzales and Courtney Fleurantin.
Our opening theme song is Maya B's original track titled They Don't Know. You should download the full song today. To learn more about today's guests or the show, visit our show notes.
Second Sunday is a production of The Cube in partnership with the PRX Big Questions Project, which is generously supported by the John Templeton Foundation and produced by PRX Productions.
The Cube is your #1 curated platform to discover the best BIPOC and QTPOC podcasts.
Support this show and more like it by joining the Cube app and follow The Cube across social media at the Cube app.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode.